Welcome to Meditations, a Stoic podcast, a 12-episode limited series exploring the writing of Marcus Aurelius. Through this work, we will examine the philosophy of Stoicism, how it applied to the life of Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, and how it applies to our own lives today. Welcome to the podcast. I am one of your hosts, the second most handsome host of this podcast, Jared Poirier. Trying to be pretty stoic this week, and I'm here with another fine gentleman.
I'm Devin Kivioya.
Who is indeed Devin Kivioya. Are you feeling pretty stoic this week, Devin?
I think so. I don't know. What does stoic feel like, do you think, Jared?
It feels pretty chill. It feels living in the moment. Feels embracing reality as it is. Any of those things clicking?
Yeah, a little bit of that.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty accurate description.
Okay, perfect. Well, then you are in a great mood for this podcast, discussing Book 9. We are getting pretty close to the end of our journey here, just as Marcus Aurelius was.
Yeah, there's 3 more after this.
3 more after this. But yeah. I'm excited to dig into this week's episode. So let's dive in. We can start with some background, and we kind of throughout this podcast we've been kind of staging this as not only the story of our relationship with the text, but also the story of Marcus Aurelius, his life, and the various things that he achieved or fucked up throughout that time. We spent a lot of time talking about the military campaigns, military life, being involved with wars with the Germanic tribes, all of that type of stuff. Today, I want to kind of move past that, which is cool, and talk a little bit about Marcus Aurelius when he returns to Rome and begins to plan for succession, right?
He's kind of planning for succession his entire life. That's kind of the main job of a Roman emperor, for a lot of different reasons. And he does have quite a few children, but not a lot of them survive to adulthood.
Mm-hmm.
I believe Commodus has an older brother who dies in infancy, and so by default, Commodus kind of just falls into the position of being the heir, which is extremely rare. I believe he was the first emperor who was born to a sitting emperor.
Yeah, so that's what I wanted to talk to you about, because we did discuss this a little bit in some earlier episodes, especially towards the beginning of the podcast. This idea, and I think it is pretty smart, right? The idea of how succession was done in Rome. It wasn't necessarily that just like your son became the emperor, right? This can have a lot of problems in terms of, monarchic system. Like probably one of the best examples is in Russia, like the fact that I believe it was Nicholas who, kind of took the reins in the early 1900s, did a complete shit job of it. Just because you are the son of or daughter of a ruler doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be good at it. And that's why I think it was pretty wise of the Romans to have this idea of like the ruler adopts the heir, right?
While you're correct about your conclusions, you're a little bit wrong about the Romans' intentions.
Okay.
The idea was always to have your son be the one who succeeded you. It's just that so few Roman emperors had a living son by the time it was time for succession. I think maybe before Commodus, 1 or 2 emperors had succeeded their fathers. What you need to understand here is, and I'm going to ask you a question. What do you think the life expectancy at birth in ancient Rome in this period was?
Probably like 60, 70 years old.
25 years old.
Oh, because so many people died young. right?
Yeah, but if you
Yeah.
live to be 20, then your life expectancy would go up to about 55, 60,
Okay, that makes sense.
right?
Because
But
because
at birth,
when I'm reading about like the Stoic philosophers and stuff like that, even some of like the ancient Greek philosophers, a lot of the time they would live to be like 60, 70 years old. So that's kind of what got me thinking that. Yeah, yeah. Makes sense though.
yeah, and beyond that, this is a period where there's plagues going around.
Yeah.
Warfare is starting to ramp up. And so, I mean, warfare was constantly a thing for Rome.
Hmm.
And so it was just so rare for an emperor to have an actual son to succeed him. And so in a lot of cases, they were stepsons, they were nephews. In Marcus Aurelius's case, he was related to Hadrian through his grandmother.
Hmm.
And when Hadrian chose Antoninus Pius to succeed him, he did it on the condition that Antoninus Pius had to choose Marcus Aurelius to succeed him.
Hmm.
And Marcus Aurelius insisted that Lucius Verus was included in this.
Yeah, and that's what kind of I think gets lost by a lot of people here. The idea, like this, even for myself, right? Someone who's been like very engaged with this stuff, especially doing this podcast, like engaged with the history and whatnot. I didn't really realize until this week that Marcus Aurelius only really was like the emperor in terms of like ruling by himself for about 8 years, right? Lucius,
he was always the principal ruler.
Yeah.
Politically speaking.
Yeah.
Lucius Verus didn't really have much interest in politics, to be honest. But yes, technically, he was only the sole emperor of Rome for 8 years.
Yeah. And then it's Commodus. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Yeah. Who becomes the emperor after Marcus. And so how did this happen? Like, why? That's really like what I want to get to, kind of a roundabout way of asking this question. But like, how did that happen that Commodus, who I guess, but like by all like anyone who's ever really studied this, by all reports, like didn't do a fantastic job. How did he end up becoming the emperor? Like, why did that unfold that way?
Because Commodus didn't really seem to be problematic to anybody until a couple of years after his dad died.
Yeah.
He was fine as co-emperor under his father's direction, and there, I think, was maybe 9 to 12 good months under him as emperor.
Yeah.
But it was about a year or two after his dad died that things went bad. So nobody had any reason to expect it necessarily, even though there were a lot of. It seems there was probably some people who thought he wasn't up to it.
Okay. Yeah.
But he was popular with the common people. He liked games, and he liked gladiatorial combat and things like that. And so those things were very popular with the average person. It was really only with the upper classes that Commodus was unpopular.
Yeah, and Marcus Aurelius was obviously popular enough at the time of his death. He was like pretty well celebrated for his military achievements, enough so that a statue of Marcus Aurelius riding a horse was erected in Rome, and 2000 whatever years later, you can still go and visit that in Rome. And maybe one day Devin and I would do that. That'd be pretty cool.
That would be rad. I'd love to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, hopefully one of these days. So, yeah, I guess like the long and short of it is Commodus, Marcus thought he would do a good job. A lot of the people who were advising him thought that he would do a good job. No one really was able to see the future, and he seemed about as good a choice as anybody for succession, right?
Yeah, and I mean, he's as complex a character as you'll get. And kind of his own story. But I mean, he went so bad that to this day, people associate his image with Joaquin Phoenix, and imagine this horrible, horrible dude.
Yeah, well, he's gone on to commit a lot of atrocities, making that Joker movie, and the movie was okay.
It was just depressing, man.
Yeah.
Like, when I got to the end, I was like, wow, what a great movie, but why?
Yeah.
Just why?
Well, some movies are just depressing, man. That's a okay type of movie to be, right?
God, I
Yeah.
don't want that.
But this isn't a movie podcast. This is a
No.
kind of a history, kind of a philosophy podcast. So let's dig into if you're good with that. Cool if
Yeah.
we start getting in this chapter a bit. Okay, sweet.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I discussed, we're talking about chapter 9. I do think it's kind of a good activity to try to distill some of these chapters. Some of them, submit to that distillation a little bit easier than others. This one I think was a little bit hard, but one of the
I don't
things,
think so.
yeah, you think this is accurate? Like my kind of reading here?
No, I mean, I think I can boil it down in a couple of words.
Okay,
Don't be a dick.
don't be a dick. All right.
Yeah, that seemed to be the overarching theme of this chapter. Most of it seemed to be kind of along the narrative of acting against your fellow human is unnatural.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And
Which
there's
I would
some,
translate as don't be a dick.
yeah, there is some stuff about like justice and the nature of justice that opens the chapter. But yeah, especially like at the end, it does get quite a bit into that idea of, it's more natural to live with people, and kind of like your goal in life is to live with other people and to help people. I think that is true. For me, I think the most resonant part of this chapter, this book, whatever you want to call it, is this idea of like looking at the big picture, right? This is the thing that like came through, at least for me personally, the most, like here in section 30, see them from above, animals, rituals, voyages, like herds of animals, right? To try to view like everything for like as a group, as to try to see like the systems, right? And not really the individuals. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I can understand that. It's the sort of thinking that I become really prone to when I'm on mushrooms or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. Thinking about things in the aggregate less than thinking about your own like personal perspective, kind of like viewing yourself embedded in like a bigger system, right?
Exactly. Seeing yourself as part of a larger whole.
Yeah, I'm not sure if he was on mushrooms, but I guess he could. I guess he could have been.
There's no reason he couldn't have been, but let's assume he wasn't.
More likely a lot of wine, I think, but
Good chance. Yeah,
yeah.
alcohol was a much safer thing to drink than water for a long time in a lot of places. Although Rome had pretty clean water if you don't count the lead.
If you take the lead out, yeah, you get the lead out. Yeah, then it was pretty safe. But if you didn't want to drink lead, then there was that wine. I mean, they probably kept the wine in like something lined with lead too, so whatever. But
good chance, but I'm sure they must have had like all sorts of different drinking vessels made out of bronze or gold or different things. They were aware of the harmful properties of lead.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go out of their way to overuse it, but it was just the best thing on their aqueducts.
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I think that either one of those are a pretty good distillation. I probably can't call the chapter "Don't Be a Dick," but we'll chapter 9, "Don't Be a Dick," Marcus Aurelius. Yeah.
Quotation marks.
Yeah, so I want to get into a few of the themes or kind of like ideas that really came through in this chapter. I want to call this section "Want to be happy? Then lower your expectations."
That's depressing.
Well, is it depressing though? Let's find out. Let's dig into that concept a little bit. So section 29 here, he says, don't go expect when he's talking about kind of like the political situation, like this type of stuff, kind of like the status, I guess, of Roman society, right? Don't go expecting Plato's Republic. Be satisfied with even the smallest progress. And that's kind of
so much wordier, but yes.
Yeah, I bet it is in your translation, right? Yeah, so this idea of, Plato's Republic really being, and we've talked about this quite a bit, that like ideal system, right? Like in an ideal world, what would a political organization look like? That's kind of like Plato's Republic. Something to definitely to strive for, right? And something to keep in mind as we build systems is like, what is the ideal? But in terms of like actually, your worldview and, trying to be stoic and trying to live like a satisfied life and have a good mindset. I think like one of the best ways to do that is to, accept things as they are. And yeah, truly, like I do mean this, like lower your expectations. As that might seem like kind of a weird, like defeatist attitude, I think in the reality that we live in, it is really the only way of finding inner peace.
Yeah, probably. I want to say that there's a better way to say it than lower your expectations. I think it's learn to extract as much as you can from the small things.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, the happiest people that I know are the kinds of people who, like, I don't know, the smallest thing happens and they, like, buy a cake and get a party. They're so damn happy.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Their plants come up and they throw a party.
Yeah.
Just anything that happens makes them happy. Those are the really happy and resilient people.
Yeah, that's good, man. You get like a nice chocolate bar, celebrate that. You get laid, celebrate that. They have your beer at the beer store, something to celebrate. Yeah, celebrating the
With
little
a beer,
things in
yeah.
life. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I purposely kind of chose to phrase it this way to like, I don't know, like be whatever. Like to upset people.
Pragmatic.
To upset people.
Just soften the blow, man.
Yeah. Yeah, it's always good to have a little bit of controversy. Here, kind of driving the similar point home in section 42, don't ask the impossible. Just to read a small bit of it here. When you run up against someone else's shamelessness, ask yourself this: is a world without shamelessness possible? So, you can put shameless, you can put rude, you can put selfish, anything kind of in there. Like there are people like that in the world, and maybe the world like needs those people to function. We've talked about this a bit before. And yeah, like if you go around expecting that there's going to be no negative people in the world, you're going to constantly be disappointed. Like these people exist, right? Just through the reality of the situation.
Yeah, and I think like understanding is usually a path to acceptance. And so it's part of this is understanding that they're all products of their environment, just like you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this kind of gets to that, I don't think it's quite said in those words, though.
Yeah, going back to that idea of like, don't get upset when a fig tree is making figs, right? Like you should.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't throw a fish at the foot of a tree and ask it to climb.
Yeah, indeed. Although that might be a cool YouTube video or something. I don't know.
Just screaming at a fish like, "Get up there!"
You'll probably get quite a few views if you did that, right? Yeah, and this section 2 here, to go back towards the beginning of the chapter, I do like this part here as well, right? Like just like paraphrase, real luck would be to end your life without ever encountering dishonesty, hypocrisy, self-indulgence, pride. The next best voyage is to die when you've had enough. Kind of like how this is phrased. It seems, this is the idea, right? This seems very negative. Like when you say, oh, you want to be happy, lower your expectations. That does sound like a negative thing. But if you kind of shift your view of it a little bit, you do realize like the wisdom in that, right?
I do see the wisdom in it. I was being facetious.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, you're right about it. It's really, it's kind of the best way, the only way to go about it.
Yeah. You're being facetious. I'm being purposely provocative the way that I'm phrasing it, right? So.
Yeah, exactly. I think this last point, like you're saying, the next best voyage is to die when you've had enough. There's like, that seems like radical acceptance to me and not necessarily like a form of negativity.
Mm-hmm.
It's just radical acceptance of life.
Yeah, and I also like this view of it because it does kind of tie into something that um really like emerges from the bigger picture of like Stoic thinking, right? Like this idea that like it's okay to think that life is kind of a fucking drag because it is, right? And to view death as like a form of relief, right? That like we won't have to deal with this anymore. Like we won't have to deal with these selfish people. We won't have to deal with like so many of the things that are just like shitty about life, right? Like cancer and fucking like your leg hurts, like whatever it is.
I think it's wonderful, but I can tell
Yeah.
you the expression of that makes
Yeah.
people uncomfortable.
It does. Yeah, it does
Yeah,
until yeah.
absolutely. Because I'm somebody who thinks that way. Like, I don't want to die tomorrow, but
Yeah.
when death comes, I will be ready. I'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not gonna piss my pants. Maybe I'll want more time, but
Yeah.
I'll face it with whatever dignity I have left at the time.
Yeah, for sure. Exactly.
And that's okay with me. But you say that to people, and some of them get really, really uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah. And this idea too that like I can't remember exactly where it is in this chapter, but the idea that those who live a long life have no advantage over the untimely dead, right? Like hard to kind of wrap your head around. We're not really taught to think that way for whatever reason, right?
Yeah.
But maybe something to grapple with and something that is potentially very true.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, pity the living, not the dead.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, kind of like that. And like a related idea that I do want to dig in. I think we can move on to our next discussion here. This idea of like aligning your desires with what's within the realm of things that you control. So I really, really resonated with this part here, right? Section 40. So, and they use the word pray. If you're not like a particularly religious person, you can kind of substitute the word like hope or the word wish, right? I think is like perfectly fine in this type of context, right? So instead of saying, we'll just say pray for because that's the language that they use, right? Instead of praying like I hope that I don't encounter something that I'm afraid of, right? Or I like all of these things like there's desire, there's fear, there's grief, right? Instead of being like, oh, I hope that like bad things don't happen to me, it's like I hope that I don't okay, like I hope that I don't run into a bear. Instead of hoping that you don't run into a bear, hope that you're not afraid of running to a bear. Does that make sense?
I do think it makes sense. I think that stands a little bit for some people. Something like that's going to stand on the side of what doesn't really feel possible. So for myself personally, what I hope is that when I do feel fear or grief or desire, that I face it well.
Mm-hmm.
I think that encountering these kinds of emotions is inevitable. You're always going to encounter things that make you feel intense shit, right?
Yeah.
So for me, it's not about hoping it doesn't happen or that I don't feel it. It's about hoping that I deal with the outcomes well.
Maybe like that is to me that's like halfway there though. To me, like the real Stoic like view is to get past that, like fear of death or fear of bad things or whatever, that you literally don't experience the negative emotion, right?
But there's always going to be new things you fear.
Yeah.
Right? Like fear's never going to go away. So you just need to live in harmony with fear and have a good relationship with it.
Maybe. But the ideal, like what you should really hope for is to transcend it. That's what I think anyways, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I just don't know if that'll ever truly be a thing.
Yeah. Well, I can just give you like a personal example from my own life, right? So this is something like I have like a neighbor. Not going to say their name on the podcast. They annoy me. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of people have this experience. They have an annoying neighbor, right?
Yeah.
Instead of saying, man, I hope my neighbor stops being annoying, what you should say is, man, I hope that I stop being annoyed by my neighbor.
Yeah, but then there's going to be some other asshole neighbor who annoys you, and you're going to have to go through that again.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So, like,
Yeah.
for me, it's like, I get the point, but for me, it's just like, there will always be things that annoy me. There will always be things I'm afraid of. Maybe
Yeah.
they won't be the same things they are now, but for me, it's just more about having a good relationship with it. And I see your point. I just
Yeah.
don't, I don't know. It seems a little bit on the side of less possible, the idea of like eliminating these emotions.
Right. Yeah.
You know, it just doesn't seem human.
It does kind of seem like it might not be human, but in a way, I think that like since we've started this podcast and since I've really been studying Stoicism, I have been able to retrain my brain to think like this, right? To think in this like way of how can I like transcend my own emotions or like my own first impulses, right? Like something will happen, this will be like my impulsive reaction. How do I start retraining that impulsive reaction to be more stoic?
Yeah, but you're
It's
never
hard,
going to eliminate like reactions like that. New ones will come up. You know what I mean?
I suppose. Yeah.
Like the elimination of the emotion itself is not possible because emotions are your body's way of telling you things,
Yeah.
right? Like they're your brain's like reactions to things, and you're supposed to be reading those emotions so you understand yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so they're there for a reason in an evolutionary sense, right?
Yeah.
And so they'll never be gone. There will always be new things to give emotion, and so like the idea of transcending, I
Yeah.
don't know. That's some shit hippies say, man. Like,
yeah, but maybe it is possible, and
Maybe.
maybe that is the goal, or maybe it's too far, right? Like to get to a point where you're not feeling any emotion, like that would be pretty weird too, right? So
sounds like it would suck.
yeah, perhaps it is. As someone who's like kind of trying to do that, though, it is very freeing. Like to try to feel less emotion is quite free, especially when it doesn't really serve you, right? Like in
But if
cases,
somebody gave you a button and it was a binary, either turn it
yeah,
all off or keep it all, what would you choose?
yeah, you would keep it, right?
Yeah.
And learn how to deal with it. And I think that
Yeah.
is really like in truth, that is all the kind of the best that you can hope for, I suppose. Yeah.
That's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
But
Anyways, but
like,
you'll always have an annoying neighbor, and to wish that your neighbor would stop being annoying is not like actually going to be helpful. It's just going to kind of make you more upset.
It's not
So
realistic either.
yeah, yeah. Or similarly, like we're all going to feel a certain way, looking at Angelina Jolie in the Tomb Raider franchise. You'll never be able to really like get rid of those feelings.
I'm just curious, what are your feelings about that franchise?
Oh, I mean, I'm just saying that Angelina Jolie looks sexy in those movies. I'm not going to really go anywhere past that. The first one's better than the second one.
I actually didn't know there was a second one, to be
Oh
honest.
yeah, Cradle of Life or whatever. Anyways,
Oh.
yeah. Speaking of life, oh my God, what a good. I'm on it today. We're podcasting, baby. Speaking of
Oh, yeah.
life, and this is someone whose life ended, and they dealt with it, I think, in a very philosophical way and quite a calm way that I think is inspiring and could be emulated. So, Epicurus, I want to talk a little bit about this guy because he's brought up in this chapter of Meditations. So Epicurus was a philosopher, I think before like the Stoics, obviously before like Epictetus and Seneca and some of the guys that we've talked about here. But I do think that this is a kind of Stoic mentality. And there were like Cynic philosophers and stuff like that at that time. So these ideas were around. Epicurus died a very painful death. at the age of 72, something like a kidney stone, bladder stone scenario, right? And
That
Marcus,
sounds terribly painful.
yeah, especially at the time that they didn't really have a way of like treating this, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and talks about here how, Epicurus like faced this stuff and really like gave an example of how you can face death in a positive way and not really be afraid of it. Saying that, when people would come to visit him in his deathbed, he didn't waste their time with like complaining about his pain, his ailments, the things that he was suffering through. He just remained a philosopher until the end. So when people would come to visit him, he wanted to discuss philosophy, and particularly he wanted to discuss how the mind can participate in the sensations of the body and yet maintain its serenity and focus on its own well-being. So I just think that this is pretty cool. Maybe there's not like a whole lot to discuss here, but the idea that like even on your deathbed you can show that virtue and remain a philosopher until the end. And I think that really shows like a true strength of character, right? And it shows really a true like philosopher's mentality. It's very easy to have a belief system when you feel well, when you're healthy. When these things actually do get challenged, is maybe towards the end of your life when you're experiencing like sickness and stuff like that. Like if are you able to truly remain a philosopher and truly remain like dedicated to your belief system? I just think this is a cool example.
It's funny, that's similar to Epictetus. He used to say that philosophy is a way of life and not a theoretical discipline.
Mm-hmm.
And that it's got to be in everything you do.
Yeah, and Marcus Aurelius definitely believed this as well, right? And that's kind of the whole like point of Stoicism, is that it's not just philosophy to fucking talk about and write like big essays about and that sort of thing. Like it needs to be applied to your life. So this is a good example of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. You want to dig into a few? I just have a couple here, like short quotes. I don't know if you pulled the
yeah, I got them. Actually, yes, I did.
So this one here, very, very famous quote from this work, Meditations, one that will come up. Actually, both of the ones that I pulled are quite famous, some of the most famous of the entire work. You can also commit injustice by doing nothing. That's here in section 5. We'll get your translation. It'll probably be longer than that.
Not that bad, actually.
Yeah, not too bad.
He often acts unjustly who does not do a certain thing, not only he who does a certain thing.
Yeah, you have to think about it for a second, but it means the same thing.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you experienced does this like ring true to you? Have you experienced this?
It's definitely a thing. I don't really have a specific example that comes to mind, to be perfectly honest with you. I mean, I guess, you know what? The prime example would probably be like kind of absent or neglectful parents.
Okay.
By not doing a thing, you're committing a bad act.
For sure. Or yeah, like parents who don't like have any discipline for their kids, right?
Yeah, that too. Yeah.
That's a good. Yeah,
I would
that's
say
a
that
very
falls
good
under
example.
neglect.
Yeah. Definitely. Yep.
Yeah.
I'm agreeing with you, just using different words, kind of.
Yeah.
Anyways, and this second one here, probably within like the top 3 most famous quotes from the entire work. Today I escaped from anxiety, or no, I discarded it because it was within me, in my own perceptions, not outside.
Huh.
From
Today I have
13.
got out of all trouble, or rather I have cast out all trouble, for it was not outside, but within and in my opinions.
Mm-hmm.
Just needlessly like long, but yeah, same stuff.
Yeah, by trouble, I suppose they mean anxiety. Yeah, this idea that, like negative emotions, you may think that they are like intrinsically linked to reality, right? This idea that like someone spit on my face, therefore I got angry. We view those as like inseparable, right? Like they spit in my face, I'm angry. When in truth, it goes back to that thing of like if someone has like succeeded in provoking you, then you're complicit in the provocation, right? That you really do have the power to react to that however you want, right? Someone can walk up and slap your mother, and your reaction to that can be to punch them in the face or anything else, right? You don't have
So
to, yeah, you don't have to like reciprocate that anger or whatever.
So I agree, but maybe there are times where anger is a reasonable and justified reaction. Like it doesn't exist for no reason, right?
Yeah.
It has evolutionary impetus, and there's reasons we feel angry, and there's probably times you need to listen to your anger and react.
Maybe, but for me personally in my life, like anger is almost always destructive. And
Oh God.
it almost always leads to like a worse situation, right? And things like escalate. Like the minute that you start taking revenge is the minute that like things start to escalate.
You don't necessarily have to take revenge, but it's been my experience that some people will walk all over you until you push back.
Yeah, that's true. That's
Some
true.
people need to be pushed back against.
Oh, sometimes they need to be pushed back against. But I would say always, like almost always, perhaps, it's good to like step back and be strategic about that, right? Instead of just
Yes.
reacting in the moment, right?
There's a reason that they say revenge is a dish best served cold.
There you go.
For
Yeah.
those who don't understand what that means,
Yeah.
what it means is that if you want to take revenge, you wait until
Yeah.
it's been so long that nobody would assume you'd do anything.
Yeah.
You'll do a better job of it once you've calmed down too. I promise.
There's like a E40 song about this that I'll send you later, Devin.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah.
Yeah, but like in all seriousness, in all seriousness though, yeah, like the best, as it says in meditations, the best revenge is to not be like that person. And you know, like for me, I am like a practical person, and I would rather like the situation be solved than just like get satisfaction from, like reacting a certain way. Like that doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily solve the problem. And sometimes it makes it a lot worse, right? So,
So like what you need to understand is that anger existed with in an acceptful and kind of harmonious way that's a bit detached
mhm.
when used properly isn't about taking revenge or getting back something in some sort of satisfaction way.
Mhm.
It's about calculated shows of force to achieve important aims,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. And,
It's supposed to be calculated, not emotional.
yeah. And this is like a big thing. Like, everyone experiences this in fucking middle school or whatever, like getting bullied and stuff like that, right? And how you actually like if you just let a bully you, they're going to keep bullying you, right? You have to do
Yeah,
like
exactly.
at
Right?
some
Like
point you have to do something.
you have to know when to show force and do
Yeah.
those things.
You got to know when to
And that's
hold
that's
them
not
and
always
when to fold
kosher
them.
these days,
Yeah.
but whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyways, we're not going to get into that argument. Devin, kids are too soft these days. Podcast.
That's not what I said. Adults are too soft these days, not
Yeah.
kids.
Yeah. Anyways, yeah. Well, neither of us are parents, so I don't know. Whatever.
Thank God.
Yeah. We're dog parents though, and we can parent our damn dogs however we want. Anyways.
Exactly, yeah. Within reason.
Yeah. So cool. Are you good to dig into kind of like the point of this podcast, applying these lessons to our lives today?
Yeah, I suppose so.
Okay, cool.
Um,
So I wrote did you have something else?
no.
Oh, you can start.
Okay. So this first idea, do you face fear and anxiety purely because you're adopting too narrow a view? How do these feelings change when you consider the big picture? I think this is a problem that I used to have in a
Mm-hmm.
really big way. Like I had like one specific view about how my life was supposed to be, and like
Mm.
no thing short of that was acceptable, you
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, those kinds of ideas about life can be really limiting and really harmful and stuff like that. Um, and I mean this whole thing gets back to kind of being happy with whatever small things you get, you know?
Yeah, for sure. This is definitely one for me, just as like a business owner, that like anxiety is always kind of like that fear as well, is always kind of there, right? In like the back of your mind, especially if you're looking too much, at like the present, like situation, or if you're just like too focused on like this or that minute thing, like, you know, let's say that you like had a shoot and like something weird happened with the sound and it just like wasn't exactly what you wanted. And you can really beat yourself up about that, or, have a bad month, right? Didn't make enough money this month, right? Only had a few shoots, didn't make that much money. In the moment, you can feel a lot of fear and anxiety about that. And then you start extrapolating, well, if I have too many bad months in a row, then my business is fucked and I'm going to be homeless. But very few like problems that I found like in my life, especially like trying to apply this stuff. There's very few like fears and anxieties that you can't erase just by like widening that view. Like if I take a wider view and I look at like what my life was like even in university or like the first few years of running my business compared to what it is now, like that's a story of like immense progress and growth. But if I stay too focused on this or that minute detail in the moment, yeah, I can like have a lot of fear and anxiety. If I look at the big picture, I realize that, like it's things are charting in a nice direction, even though it like might not seem like that in the moment, right?
Yeah, yeah, I can understand that. For me, in a lot of ways, this gets back to living in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
If you're like me and you don't really feel like there's been any progress in your life and you kind of actually feel like everything's kind of taken a huge fucking crash and you got nothing, um, then, you just have to get back to living in the moment and not really thinking about those things. Because if I'm thinking about those things, I'm not dealing with the problem.
True. And if you look at an even bigger picture than that, like nothing that you do in your life actually matters. Right?
Oh, thank God. You know what? That takes a lot of pressure off.
Yeah, man. Like really, I do truly mean this. Like, just there's, like I said, there's not very many like fears and anxieties that you can't erase just by looking at a bigger picture. I mean, even like the whole political system, right? Like, you know, not to like timestamp this podcast or whatever, but there's like the US election and yada, 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 right? You can get really upset about that stuff if you want. If you look at like the bigger picture of history, maybe this isn't like as important an event as it might seem, like the day-to-day news of it that, really derails people and gets people really upset, right?
I can't stress that nothing takes those things off my mind more than reminding myself that I have nothing to do with that. I have no effect on
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
In 100 years, nobody will remember my name, and not a damn thing will be different because I lived and or died.
I mean,
Like it just takes a huge amount of pressure off.
maybe in 100 years, man, maybe in 100 years, people will still talk about Devin Kiviyoya, but there will be eventually a time when they don't, right? And there'll be a time when
Yeah,
people forget Marcus Aurelius. There'll be a time when people forget, every Genghis Khan or whoever the hell, right? Like time will eventually erase all of it, right? So there'll be a time when people forget
yes,
that the Earth ever existed. You know what I mean? Yeah.
yeah. Well, the Earth will still exist by the time people aren't around to know it existed.
But the Earth will eventually not exist.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Yeah, like when the sun eats it or whatever's going to happen,
Nom nom nom.
Nom, nom.
It's not
The
that the
sun's
Earth
hungry.
stops existing at that point.
Yeah,
It's that its matter becomes part of another thing.
there you go. As we all do, right? Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Circle of life. Blah blah blah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. exactly. Like Lion King forever. Are your are your expectations of others too high? What would happen if you lowered them and focused on improving yourself?
Yeah, that's like a golden question, man. Um, Everybody's got their own shit, and they're having their own problems, and they have their own, complexes and hang-ups and fears and, goals. And you know what, honestly, like, I've learned, like, you can't expect too much out of them because they're too busy on themselves, and that's perfectly reasonable. That's really human,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, most people a lot of the time are just barely getting by.
Yeah,
And so you can't really expect them to give you any energy they don't have.
yeah. My wife Masha struggles with this a lot because she's someone who has like very high like personal standards in terms of like how she lives her life, but also like, keeping the house really clean or like little I guess like etiquette rules and shit like that she follows in her life, right? And when
Yeah.
other people don't, I do have to remind her, some people like you can't get upset with people for not following rules that they don't even understand, right? Like if we went to India and, whatever, like left our sandals on or something like that. I've never been to India. I'm not sure what the etiquette is there. But yeah, if we ate our fucking tandoori with sandals, maybe you're not supposed to do that there. Like you didn't know that. So how can you get upset with people for stuff like that, right?
Well, and not everybody lives by the same standards, right?
For sure. Yes, exactly.
Like to people who have lived reasonably comfortable lives, manners make sense.
Yeah.
To the average person, what good do table manners do me?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And to think like you have a finite amount of energy and a finite amount of influence in your life, like that's just true. So it's wasted on other people, right? That's what
Yeah.
I'm saying. And it's much more, it's better to use your time like focused on yourself, focus on improving yourself because that's what you actually do have control over is, your own mindset and shit like that and what you do with your own life.
It's a much more healthy mindset because when you have high expectations of others, the mechanism, what's really going on in your mind is that you think you deserve these things out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. True.
Right?
Yep.
When you don't, they don't owe you anything.
Yeah. In truth, they don't.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to do this last one?
Does desiring more make you unhappy? Can you train yourself to desire less? I think, you know, desire is important because it's kind of at the heart of ambition, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And ambition is a big part of what keeps a lot of people going day to day, having goals to strive for and stuff like that. But I think that desire needs to be something that we do mindfully, right? Like we need to make sure that the things that we desire don't harm us simply by desiring them.
Yeah.
And what we desire is a reflection of who we are too. So we have to consider what the things that we desire might say about us.
Totally. Yeah. And I think it does really go back to that idea of, like it's okay to want things and it's okay to enjoy things, right? But don't become like dependent on it. And especially when it comes to like outcomes, right? Don't be dependent on like this certain outcome happening. Yeah, I think it is like very freeing to start to think about things in that way. Like you'll be happy if it does turn out, but if it doesn't, you'll also be fine.
And don't assume you're owed an outcome because you took the steps, right?
Yeah, the universe does not work like that, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
For sure.
if you don't have it, then you got to keep working at it.
Yeah, man, you got the rifle, you got the ammunition, you're covered in deer piss. You still might not actually catch that deer.
Yeah, or that John F. Kennedy or whatever.
What?
I don't know. I was just calling back to our old podcast.
Okay. I don't know. Did he have a thing for deer piss? I didn't know that.
I don't know. I mean, that would make the story more funny.
Yeah, I missed that in my research somehow. Anyways,
Yeah, deer piss everywhere, bud.
yeah, deer piss is the true force of history, I guess. So want to give these people some homework?
Excuse me.
I'm
Yeah,
gonna do
so
I'm gonna
make
do this one. I don't always do the homework, but I'm gonna do this one with you guys.
okay. You
Okay.
do it.
No, no, no. I mean, I'm gonna do the homework. You can give them the homework.
Oh, sorry. Okay, make a list of things in life that dissatisfy you. How can a change in perspective alleviate this suffering?
Cool. One to think about. Perhaps a good activity to do. We almost have a solid hour of podcasting here, so I'm just gonna leave you with a quote from the great philosopher Socrates. The secret of happiness is not found in seeking more, but in developing the capacity to enjoy less.